Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. Extra Hop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at securityweekly.com/Extra Hop.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Ben Carr and Tyler Robinson. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover on one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. If you send me an email, I'm just going to point you to the form. We review those suggestions monthly and we'll reach out to you once reviewed. All right, gentlemen, articles, but the conversation continued a little bit during the break from that last segment, which I thought was interesting. It ties a little bit into this first article. Because when I think about the security industry, I started security in '96. I've been in this a long time. And when I got into security, we called it information security, information protection. The word cyber wasn't used. And this article kind of steps back and says, what is security? Why do we do this? What is the purpose of what we do? Because I think for a lot of us in the industry, it's our passion for what we do that excites us, accelerates us, allows us to grow and achieve. And it ties a little bit into the last discussion where, sometimes the technical folks don't want to give up their technical side. They love the technology. They love the technical aspects. But sometimes you have to give that up if you're going to move up into a CISO role, right? And so I don't know if you guys read this full article. I've read the whole thing because I thought it was a really interesting way to think about security and how it ties into some of our basic needs and how we as professionals are really there to try to help with some of those basic needs for not only for consumers and other people, but just in general in our industry.
Yeah, it was super interesting around the psychology of safety and your ability to tie that to respect, and whether this is a product, a person, a company. Like when you're talking about what we actually do, we're providing those pieces that allow business to operate at the psychological level, and like you said, the personal needs level, that safety, the potential to be a good product, to get value from something. All of those things tie into our psyche, and really what we're doing is enabling the business, if we're doing this right, to achieve those general needs that have to happen in order for someone to want to purchase something or utilize a business or a product.
So yeah, I go ahead, Ben.
I would just say I agree. First thing I thought was, wow, Matt, you picked a really long article for this one. But I started to read it and I liked it. I enjoyed the concept of it, and where it hit home for me was, again, I get back to diversity. We need to think about how we approach security and why we're doing it, and what the best way to get the intended result is. And I think a lot of times we don't focus on the human side of it. We don't address, what is actually going to motivate the intended use by the people in the organization or the customers we have or, the board. And I think if we think about it in more of those terms, I think we could potentially be a lot more successful in the long term.
Yeah, I've used this analogy before because I came from the nuclear power side of the world. I worked 7.5 years in nuclear power, and it wasn't a security issue; it was a safety issue, right? And I think this correlation of security and safety is one of these underlying principles. I don't think we do a good job some days in our industry to really equate. We're there to provide a level of safety for our products, for our data, for our consumers, et cetera. And we kind of get caught up in the words around security and cybersecurity, and we use a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt sometimes. But at the end of the day, it goes back to like this just basic foundational elements of providing a level of safety. And that's what I loved about the article. It's one of the reasons I love this industry, right? I love it from the value purpose perspective of what we do, and what we're trying to do is to help us provide better security or safety for the things that we do in our day-to-day jobs. And that's why I took so much to this article. And yes, it's a little long, Ben, I'm sorry, but I thought it was a good reflection back on what it is we're actually here to do. And I thought that was a really good foundational article.
I think that's one of the other parts that, as an attacker, right? Like that is one of the key things that will stand out when you start to deal with people that operate on the offensive side and companies that do really good offensive security and provide value to organizations. Those are the ones that really do connect the dots to the human. They make it personable. They tie to the board and not just the business risk, which even some companies don't even get to the extent where they're linking the business risks to the technical pieces. Taking that a step further and tying that to the personal aspects of this, those are the ones that are doing a good job. They're providing the impact statements. They're providing the big levers to pull and the why behind it. If we as humans don't have that why, the psychology doesn't link those neurons together, and we're not able to make those leaps between business, technology, and the people and reason why we're actually doing what we do.
Right. Ben, did you have another comment in there?
No, okay. I agree. I mean, yep.
So this next article, I brought it in for one main reason. It talks about how cybersecurity changed through the pandemic. And I think most of the things in this article we know, right? We went from trusted to untrusted and borderless and all this other stuff. But there was a section on the BSO in here. And the reason I pulled this in is to tie to the first segment. And it's interesting how he talks about the evolution of the BSO role, which we just kind of debated in the last segment, as one upside to consider. And I think he's thinking about the BSO in a much larger organization, similar to the conversation we were having, Ben, last segment, is that in the really large like enterprises like financial, having 4 BSOs across the business lines working closely with the CISO makes a lot of sense. That isn't necessarily the case for all organizations, though.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
I think one of the things that I seen in this one, though, it does say that the pandemic did bring a lot of ability to attract different talent, right? And that is a huge uptick. We've seen, remote talent. We've seen a lot of companies that were anti-remote. They didn't have the capabilities. We've seen the ability to fully work remote, which has been great for work-life balance in some cases, maybe not in all cases, but the thing that I think people are missing, though, is a lot of these companies were forced into this remote work, this remote talent. And so not everybody has that figured out. And I think there's some evolution that is going to continue to happen. And companies are going to have to realize they have to evolve. There is ways to do this better. And, there's a lot of lessons learned that I think some of these companies are just starting to hit the precipice. So the CISO role, the BSO role, those are going to be critical for how the culture adapts, how the company starts to mature, and what that remote work looks like in a very healthy and positive manner. Because, again, a lot of these companies were forced into this, and it doesn't mean they're doing it well. So I think they're going to have to continue to get a pulse on the organization, really understand their people, and make sure that this is the right move, and they're doing it in a way that actually is meaningful and works for this talent that they are attracting.
Yeah.
Well, we'll
hit that in. Go ahead, Ben.
No, I was just saying it's essential for the BSO role, right? As we emerge and we have more of these roles available, I think, thinking about how we engage with this remote workforce and how we make sure that we're meeting the demands of, this changing environment, I think it's really important to have somebody who can kind of capture that and act as that interface both inbound and outbound.
Yeah, we have an article at the very end a little bit on this topic. I should have put it right here in the order, but I didn't know we would go down this path at this part of the conversation. But we will talk about this a little bit in the last story around hybrid work and some of the tools and the maturity and the technology, to your point, Tyler, that's going to have to evolve to continue to support this remote and hybrid work environment. So we'll get there. The next article I put in here was really around how facility managers should work with IT and potentially security to secure networks. I think one of the big challenges, having come out of the nuclear world, right? I know how those plants were run. They weren't run by IT folks. They were run by plant managers. And when we think about manufacturing, right? We think about these different manufacturing environments, these are areas that we have to deal with, but they're not necessarily IT or security people. So this is a really interesting challenge.
Just the last part.
What was that? Oh, sorry. Oh, right. Must have been my network. Sorry, guys. I said they're not traditionally IT or security people, so how do they help protect these plant environments from attacks, right? And I thought this article did some interesting call-outs of areas that the plant managers should really start to think about.
Well, that's always been the problem, Matt, right? With IT and OT and security, the intersection of them, right? I mean, the OT environment's it's run by facilities and plant operations people, whether you're manufacturing and putting out Doritos chips, or whether you're managing a data center and you're on the the facility side of the house. There's an intersection of that IT OT environment, and it's just always been challenging because it's been managed in a different way. And so I struggled with that when I was back at Visa. We had issues with that when I was at Nokia. And it just continued to be an issue. And I think you're seeing a lot of that intersection kind of breaking down, and people assuming now that they have to address that. Yeah, I think you've seen the emergence of several companies that have kind of in the cybersecurity side that have kind of come up to address that intersection.
And not even just the OT side. Well, the OT side, but ICS in particular, those are we've got a much broader awareness of cybersecurity attacks, kinetics that can happen from that. But you even start to look at some of these safety, like fire protection systems. I was on a advisory board to help address the fact that they haven't looked at security side at all in any of the requirements, and it's one of the only bodies that pushes requirements for building and safety. But safety has always been the main concern. However, technology has started to ramp up with that, and you have all these connected systems. Now you've got IT yelling at OT, and they still have to operate and still have safety. So all of those things, like you said, are coming to this massive head of convergence, and we're really having to try and find the talent within inside of OT and address those people that are very specific and have that institutional knowledge, while bringing them up into a world that they're not familiar with in IT. They've kept that very separate. They may understand a lot of the things within inside the building and very technical, deep aspects, but they have no understanding of how that ties into the business, how IT functions, what the DevOps process looks like, what asset management and integration, AV, EDR, all the things that we've been doing correctly and maturing over the last 20 years in the IT space. We've got to do a better job to bring the OT space into that, not just the technology, but the people as well, and get that up to speed in a much shorter time frame, because we're already seeing this coming to a head and having real damaging effects to companies and or the availability of things. We start to think about all the security we put in. If we can shut down the power in a building or overheat a server room, with a 1997 0-day, then that's kind of a bad thing to have from a business standpoint and a CISO standpoint.
So it sounds like the plant managers are perfect candidates to be in the BSO role, because if you think about it, right, they have the operational experience around these plants, but don't necessarily have the cybersecurity expertise. Sounds like a pretty perfect match for a BSO. Just saying.
It could work.
Good work.
Yeah, those OT guys sometimes are maybe not people persons, so they have to be the right person.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Next article, time to bring the cybersecurity technical debt under control. Yes, but there was one stat in here that I thought was the way it was stated in the article. After 2 decades of playing that game of buying technology, blah, 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 some cybersecurity practices are now operating up to 20 or 30 different tools. That seems low to me. I thought it was more like 50 to 70 tools.
Yeah, I think that number does sound low for large organizations. Certainly.
Yeah, maybe a lot of those have been acquired and or rolled in. Like we've got the single pane of glass now, and now we have XDR. So all these disparate technologies are coming under one umbrella.
Kinda. So Ben, when you think about your strategy, right, at the CISO level, how do you start to deal with all these potential tools that are out there? What's the optimal number for you? Like, how do you is it 20 to 30 or is it more than that? Like, how do you whittle down some of this cybersecurity technical debt that's been building up for years before you potentially even walk into an organization?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's a number, right? I don't think I go in and say, well, I've got to have 30 tools or I've got to have, 45 tools. Like it's not a number. What I'm looking for primarily is where's the risk sit in the organization? How do I figure out how to implement a set of controls that address that risk appropriately? And if that's 20 tools and that's the right number, that's great. If it's 60, then that's the right number and that's great. Ultimately, like everyone struggles with budget and how we address budget in the organization because there's always this push to lower it. Even if you've got a decent spend, like you always feel like you're being a better corporate citizen and you're participating more at the executive level if you can come back with some type of cost savings or more cost efficiency. So I think that's always a pressure. But at the end of the day, what I'm looking for in tools is, and I think this article talked about it a little bit, is tools that integrate and work with each other in an efficient manner. I really need that integration and efficient workflow of data so I can make decisions based upon risk. I need things to work in a holistic way, and that's why I think architecture is really important. It's really great to put a new tool in that does something, but if then I'm forced with a more manual process or more work, that can make it much more difficult. So I'm looking for how to automate, how to use a common set of tools that work together well. And then, when you come into an org, you may find that there's 3 different tools doing the same thing. So I'm looking to eliminate that and get down to a standard set of tools or a reference architecture around that I'm building. So I've got, one tool for, potentially for EDR. I've got one tool for VM. And I may use something for a backup, but I certainly don't want to rely on that as, the everyday tool for VM. I have 3 different vendors I'm going to. That just doesn't work.
Yeah.
That cross domain is really critical, and I think this is still one of the big return on investments you get from your money when you do say offensive assessments or pen tests or purple team or architecture reviews. All of those things are really taking in and making those tools work and have to flex, and you see the interoperability or lack thereof between departments and their ability for teams to utilize those during an exercise, and you're emulating a potential real world exercise. So how does this work? Is it efficient? Can teams operate between each other? Is there communication? Is there gaps? So you're really getting that gap analysis and the functional ability of whether or not the tool performs as it should and whether those tools actually work together as they should.
Yeah, definitely a fun little challenge for most organizations. This next article is Washington University in St. Louis is launching a new executive cybersecurity leadership program. We've talked about these programs before on the show, and I'm just curious, do these help us or don't they? I mean, are they necessary, or are they just a way to, I don't know. I've had people ask me about the Carnegie Mellon program. People from the outside are like, well, should I go to the Carnegie Mellon program and get certified? That's not necessarily going to get you what you think you're going to get. So I'm kind of mixed on some of these programs.
Yeah, this is, I don't know. I've asked myself the same question, right? Is it worth it to go do something? Is it worth it earlier in my career? Is it worth it to get a certification? I guess it can be beneficial in some cases, but I think, if I read the article, this executive cybersecurity leadership program is targeting senior level of executives in cybersecurity. Well, if you're already a senior level executive in cybersecurity, I'd wager that you probably have the functional skill set, or I would hope so, that this program is going to provide. So I look at training or certifications more to, up level or get you new skills. If it's just attesting to the skills you have, I don't know how much value there is to that. It just, I don't know. I question it. And, this happened back with the CISSP, right? When I was a sales engineer, how many salespeople were going and getting the CISSP? Did that mean that they knew really anything about security? It didn't. It meant they were able to pass the test, right? But I think the foundational experience of actually understanding how to implement it and why is really the more interesting aspect when I'm looking to hire somebody versus whether they have a specific certification.
Yeah, I also see some of these programs, just like the master's degree in cybersecurity or whatever it is, the offensive cybersecurity. All of these programs kind of give the next generation, maybe good. There's a lot of lessons. There's some very technical technical aspects to it that can provide value to them. It gives them the expectation that they can go get this program or get this degree and hop right up into, say a junior role, a senior role, or even an executive role. The executives and the people doing a good job and the people that should be in those roles are people that have the experience, that have come up the ranks, that have the battle-hardened knowledge. While we do need to shortcut that and make that time frame less because we are short on those people, there is no real shortcut for some of the experience that you need to get there. So you do have to kind of pay your dues, and not setting them up for those expectations of, hey, I can come out of here and I can make $150,000 a year and be a senior level executive managing cybersecurity. That's not a great expectation to put from a graduate student to kind of figure that out. And we're really setting them up for failure if we're letting them jump into those roles without understanding the business, understanding the industry, and learning some of those lessons the hard way.
Yeah, this is a 6-month certification program. Does it give you enough time to really pay your dues or run your course? 6 months seems pretty fast for some of these.
What's the ROI on it too, right? I saw someone, and I can't. I remember if it was Elon Musk or it sounds like it was him when I'm thinking about it. But he was basically, or maybe it was Gary Vaynerchuk was saying, if you're thinking about going to college or getting a degree or participating in a certification program, you have to consider the ROI. And relative to that, I think there was a time when you had to have a college degree to be able to move into a professional career, right? It was just considered cost barrier of entry. But I think a lot of people in the cyber field, who don't have degrees and are fairly successful in what they're doing because degrees didn't exist for cyber, right? And if I'm coaching someone now, I just think everything's gotten so expensive, and going into debt, coming out of college with massive debt, trying to figure a way to pay that back, entering into a competitive space. I'm much more concerned with the ability to do work and be part of the team and offer value than I am whether you have a degree, a certificate, or you went to some post-degree program to get some certificate that says you can do something. Can you actually do it? Can you do the work?
Right. And people have asked me about the Carnegie Mellon program, should I make the investment to do it? And I said, what's the return on investment? You spend 20 grand or 30 grand or whatever it is to get the certification. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a job in what you think you're going to do. And I don't see this certification program being any different. I don't see the cost of it as a 6-month program, but it can't be cheap. And so does it really give you what you need to get into the space if you're outside or to move your career up to justify whatever you're going to spend to get the certification? That to me, that's the unknown, and whether these programs are worthwhile or not.
I think some of these programs, the value that they do add is if you already are building that resume, you're already working towards it, you know how to learn, you're pushing yourself, and you're that self-committed, these are value adds to your skill set for maybe a lower entry position that you're going for. If you're going for, a help desk position, or even maybe a junior analyst or SOC role, and you've got some kind of executive cybersecurity leadership certification, great. Now you know how to speak the executive language, you know how to communicate, you know what's some of the lingo and the ways in which executives are looking to move. Like, that's a great value add on to you. But you're realizing what that cost is, and long-term what that debt is. Those are things you have to consider.
Yeah, for sure. Next article, 10 effective ways to lead a strengths-based team. And I brought this article in. I like Science of People. We've had Vanessa Van Edwards on. Paul and I interviewed her. Gosh, it's probably been a couple of years ago now. But she always brings out these really good communication articles. And when you think about a cybersecurity team, a lot of your cybersecurity team are strength-based teams, which means they all have their strength across a very diverse set of capabilities. And this talks about different leadership aspects of how do you continue to motivate that team across all their strengths. So I like to bring these in because I think they're really great ways for leaders, especially CISOs, to look at how do you manage your teams in a pretty diverse area, and how do you maximize that staff that you have?
Yeah, this was interesting because I read it and I thought that I kind of feel like I've been doing a lot of this without realizing it was called strengths-based management. But I compare it and contrast, and it may not be popular, but this, the concept that we've had for a little while now of like everybody gets a trophy, right? Everybody can do everything. And I don't think functionally that really works. I think it's really important to look at individual contributors in the team and realize they've all got a different set of strengths and talents they bring to the table. And from an operational side, like knowing that and knowing how to capitalize on that, and then hiring to where you have deficiencies. So if you're missing something on the team, you need to hire to fill that gap to give you well-roundedness. I think that's super important. And I think that's important from a coaching and mentoring side too, to say, look, I hear you, you want to do X, but you're really foundationally capable at Y. And if you do that, like your long-term success will be, magnitudes better than if you focused where you thought you wanted to go. And that self-awareness, it's hard. It's hard for me to figure out where I'm good, things that I'm good at, where I didn't think I was, and things that I'm not great at that I potentially thought I was better at. And so you can learn to, minimize those weaknesses and maximize the strengths. You can focus on trying to build up areas where you have gaps. But I think just understanding that foundational differentiation between strengths and weaknesses is really, really important for your own career goals and for your teams.
Yes.
As well as identifying and knowing your team members, and the fact that everybody's kind of in a unique spot within their life. They may not be good at something currently because they've got things going on outside of it. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. So always realizing that there is more potential in people, identifying those strengths, keeping them under wraps, but also giving that grace to the individual team members, and not discounting their abilities later. And I've done this personally many times. Like, I didn't realize they're going through something, and you pass them up. You don't think about a particular role or strength that they may come into later once they get through something in their personal life, or it's a different point in their career where they've matured past something. Really realizing that you got to continually keep that touch point, keep those relationships and that dialogue and communication open with each of your team members, in case those goals change, in case their strengths change, in case things happen in their lives where the situation changes and they become a better resource or utility to you in the future that you may not have realized if you're not keeping a tab on that. Don't discount them right away.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tyler. You can have strengths, but if you don't have the desire, like, you probably won't be successful either, right? So
Right.
you kind of have to match those up. And as people's desires and strengths change over time, the person you were when you were 20 isn't the person you are when you're 40 necessarily. So I think learning to recognize that and let people functionally change. I think one of the things that it's great from a CISO perspective is let people move around in the org. Like, don't functionally pigeonhole people into, well, this guy's a great operations guy, so I'm just going to keep him in operations forever. He may just not have had exposure to GRC, and he may excel in that, or she may excel in vulnerability management and have never done it before. But once they get exposure to it, they may realize their desire changes too. So I think that's a great point you bring up.
Well, that's a great way to keep very talented and high-performing people. You'll always notice they'll often be said that they jump ship a lot, they move, they don't stay in one place. If you offer that and you want to retain talent, you keep those pathways open and you provide that novelty with inside of the company so that they can go explore, so they can have that new sense of adventure, that new challenge. That will retain talent 100-fold over any of the little benefits that you think make a great program. The workouts, the flexible time, like all of those things are great. The novelty and challenge for high performing, especially high talented and high demand people, always keeping that open path for them across the organization and not pigeonhole them. That's a huge benefit and a win, especially from, like you said, the CISO role. If you can identify that and allow that to happen, while it may be more difficult for you, you'll retain that talent and they may often come back.
Yeah, because if you're not giving them the ability to explore their purpose and keep them engaged, they will go find another job for more money and better benefits somewhere else. It's just a fact, right? And so to your point, Tyler, like, give them the opportunity to grow and try different things and stay engaged, because it's going to be really expensive to replace that talent later.
That's so true.
This last article is, in a hybrid world, your technology defines the employee experience. This kind of ties back to a conversation we had at the beginning of the segment, or towards the beginning of the segment, about this new remote workforce environment and what it's going to take from a communications, collaboration perspective to make it work. Because as Tyler said earlier, not every organization, went there freely, and they're still trying to figure it out. And how you enable technology to keep these teams engaged in these remote or hybrid work environments is going to be a key part of again, how do you retain and keep talent in the organization? Otherwise, you're going to get frustrated and leave, and now you got to go through a whole new recruiting process.
Yeah, that autonomy, like we've seen a lot of this where companies are not used to that, like providing that autonomy, not having that micromanaging. Those are really important things for high performers. You're going to get a lot of productivity out of them. You're probably noticing your work going through the roof. People get things done. That doesn't necessarily equal happiness. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a great thing for the team. You start to lose some of the team dynamics. You start to lose some of that sense of co-ownership, the collaboration between peers, the learning. All of those things feed into these high performers. While you may see an uptick in productivity and work, again, many of these companies have not figured out how to address the team dynamic or address some of the loneliness or segregation or pigeonholing that happens by default, because we all are really good at getting heads down. We're very good at getting work done. The high performers will always get the work done, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're feeling fulfilled at work. And so trying to address some of those and let the technologies not make more work for your team and have random apps to check in on you and be this automated system, but really figuring out how to get the team dynamics back and get the communication and relationships to maintain while being remote without causing this unnecessary meetings and unnecessary things too.
Yeah, I'm concerned a little bit that I think sometimes companies think too much about the tech, right? And we've done that in security. We don't think about the people component. We don't think about the friction. I struggle to think that a lot of companies think that just we'll throw more tech at it and it'll solve these problems. And I don't know that that's necessarily true in all cases. I mean, I think there is part of that. There was the article, saying how people were going to get more engaged in a virtual environment, and whether HoloLens, and we talked about that last week. But also, I think just the engagement of people like in the office, and if you're in the office, you get access to people and you can have those discussions. If you're remote, you're not having those discussions. So, is there some type of preference or preferential treatment that people are getting because they're physically face to face. I think we need to think about this hybrid way of working, and remote work is here to stay. How do we handle that as the new norm moving forward? How do we treat people with equity, because they're remote, because they're not in the office? There was another article I read, I think this last week, about a large company where they were lowering people's salaries in specific markets because cost of living was less. I just don't know if that makes sense. I think, pay people for the job they're doing, no matter where they are, right, at an equitable rate. I just think companies are really struggling how to take in the new norm that is hybrid work. It's not as easy as deploy Zoom and everything is the same as it was in the office. And I think there's a lot of reaction from employees right now on that, about their experiences are not all tech challenges. It's just companies being responsible and thinking about them in a human way.
Yep, and also addressing that each person is different. Like one check-in system and one app, where you've got the communication. Maybe that works well, and that helps some people feel more connected without having to, be on camera, or it's just enough check-in. Whereas, other people, I'll say like myself, I don't want unnecessary meetings. I don't need unnecessary video. However, I do want to be part of a team and help out. And let's connect, but let's do that on a phone call. You're thinking about me. You want to check and see how I'm doing? Call me. I don't need an app to figure out if I'm doing okay, and then you can check the app to see if you need to check in. I think we do have to have that understanding that multiple people are different. The way in which they do things and connect with people are different, but also really trying to eliminate unnecessary and unneeded work. If we're able to be more productive and get more done, and that's just fine, and we're happy with what we're doing, then allow that for those individuals where you see the disconnect. Make sure that you're making the connection and allowing different people to connect in different ways. I think conferences and getting back in person will go a long ways. Starting to look at how we can do hybrid work environments, or come into the office once in a while. These companies really do have to start to have a thought process, a design, and start to think about what we're going to look like in the next year or two, because that's when things are going to start to take a shape and a form where you're going to see companies really stand out, the ones that have thought about it, implemented good plans, had some of that flexibility, and they really know their people, as opposed to just, hey, we're going hybrid, here's 3 days, mandatory days you need to be in here with the team, and just shutting all that down. I think really having a plan, thinking through it, communicating with your teams, and really understanding what the business needs as well as what the people needs, outside of all the technology, is where we're going to see some big changes for big companies.
It's a seismic shift, and I don't know how many people have really come to grips with the fact that it's seismic. It's not just people went home for 2 years and they're coming back in the office. There is a complete difference in so many different factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was reading a really interesting article this weekend between basically the physicals and the virtuals. And if you think about our society, we're being split into these two kind of factions, where you have the virtuals, or people who are working remote in a data kind of economy, and then you have the physicals, which are the people that still have to go into work and drive trucks and all this other stuff. It's an interesting dynamic that companies really have to think about. How do you bridge the gap between the physicals and the virtuals? You can't be all one or the other, because I don't think it works. And so, Tyler, to your point, organizations that strategically think about this and figure out how to bridge the gap between the physicals and the virtuals are going to be the companies in the next couple of years that continue to excel, where others will struggle because they're trying to shove physicals into virtuals or virtuals into physicals. And either way you do that, I don't think you win. Interesting times.
I agree with that, Matt.
Yes. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.